I walk a straight line, shackled and chained. Oh, gruesome Gertie is calling my name. There is no mercy in this penitentiary. Just ask the Hillstring gang, a wrangle of three. I'm here for life, I'm here to die. Inside these walls, inside the wire. And when the wolf cries, I know it's over. Oh, bloody Angola. Oh, bloody Angola.
Hey, welcome back to the show, and I'm doing something today that initially I had not planned on doing when I started the 50 Shades of Evil series. Now, as I was researching the next evil inmate to bring you, I came across an individual with such a unique story that I absolutely had to cover it. Now, the problem with this was the inmate is from the state of Florida, and I've already covered an episode on the state of Florida. Of course, the entire premise of this series, 50 Shades of Evil, is to cover one inmate from each individual state. But when I was researching this guy that I stumbled across, I'm telling you, his story will get you thinking, and I'm like, I just got to bring this one to the people. So this story centers around a man by the name of Rocky Beeman. Now, Rocky, who was already serving life for drowning a woman during a drug robbery, became notorious in the Florida prison system. And he became notorious because he was a pedophile vigilante. At least that was his words for it. While being incarcerated, he had actually hunted down and killed 2 pedophiles in 2 separate instances behind bars, giving his version of prison justice to these inmates. Now, was he justified, or was he just another cold-blooded killer? That's what we're going to discuss today. And we're going to start off in Naples, Florida, and I'm going to take you to 1977 because that was the year Rocky was born. Now, his father was reportedly an alcoholic and, according to reports, had never even met Rocky as a child. His mother, shortly after having Rocky, would get involved with a man who would become Rocky's stepfather. Now, at a very young age, his mother, his stepfather, and Rocky, they would move to Lake Placid, Florida. Now, throughout his childhood years, courts would later describe the environment that he grew up in to be dysfunctional, to say the least. Some people would even say later in life that he was molested during his childhood, though he would never say by whom. It would not take long, however, around 1989, that Rocky would already have his own issues with alcohol at the young age of just 12 years old, y'all. So, of course, this led to experimenting with harder drugs, and by the age of 14, he had already moved to crack and meth as his 2 drugs of choice. He also used marijuana in addition to alcohol. So by 16, this kid was a full-blown drug addict. Now, people later on would theorize if he was indeed sexually abused as a child, this downward spiral into drugs and alcohol could have been pretty much predicted. They would be looked at as temporary means of escape from reality, right? But keep in mind, this kid's 16. His brain is not even close to being fully developed yet, and he is totally frying it with these hard drugs like meth and crack. So as you may expect, what comes with a life like this? Well, the criminal aspect. And by the time he's 17, he's already been arrested several times. He was arrested for thefts. He was arrested for armed burglaries and other crimes And most of these crimes, if not all of these crimes, were related to his drug addiction. Now, by 1997, Beeman goes full on in the crime thing. In the next 8 years, he garners convictions for all kinds of crimes, including battery, thefts, driving under suspension. He even has some things on his rap sheet regarding alligator poaching. And you can see this thing escalating, these crimes over time throughout that rap sheet. It's a mile long. And it started out with these nonviolent offenses, and you just see a progression from there. And by the time he was in adulthood, he would already have 3 charges of domestic violence to go along with all these other convictions that he had. Now, by the age of 27, Beeman had been in and out of jail more times than you can freaking count. And people who knew him back then, they would describe him as, well, somewhat of a dick. Just a very self-centered guy, really didn't give a shit, your typical criminal. So despite that, Rocky does manage somehow to get himself a new girlfriend, and her name was Karen Wilkins. Now, although Karen was also struggling with drugs, most people who knew her would describe her as a generally good person, although she was 12 years older than Rocky. She was 39 years old when they started dating, and he would have a lot of influence over Karen Wilkins, according to people that knew her. So on February 6th of 2005, a 47-year-old female that I'm going to tell you about by the name of Deborah Lacey would cross paths with these two. She's driving down the road, and Deborah was incidentally described as a very good person. She was a postal worker. She had a child, but not unlike a lot of folks out there, she also had issues that she was struggling with as it related to drugs. So as she's driving down this road, she sees Rocky and his girlfriend Karen, and they're sitting outside of their home, just sitting in lawn chairs. She stops in that driveway and she asks them if they had something to drink because she had some pills she needed to take. I would opine here that she was just wanting to do drugs with someone. Maybe she saw Rocky and she thought, he looks like he's someone that has done some drugs or experiments with drugs, and that's why she stopped. I don't know. But the pills, it seems like to me, when you ask someone, do you have a glass of water so I can take some pills, take some drugs, that seems like a test to see how that person is going to respond or react to that. But regardless, it's safe to say that Rocky picked up what she was putting down, if you will, because he tells her, hey, come on, let's go in the house. I have a beer in there and we can have a beer and you can swallow whatever pills you're taking and we can just shoot the shit. Now, during a conversation over beer inside of that home, somehow that conversation leads to her job at the post office and how she gets paid really good. Now, what this lady did not realize is that she was dealing with a very criminal mind here. And while she's talking about her money, all Rocky can hear is how he needs to get his hands on her money to buy drugs. So at some point, Deborah mentions she wanted to do some crack, and Rocky mentions he has a supplier for that. And at that point, they all pile into Deborah's vehicle and they go to this dealer to make a buy for some crack. So they do that. And Karen and Rocky and Deborah all get back in the car. And Rocky says, hey, I know a great place that we can go smoke this crack. We don't have to worry about any police catching us. We won't get caught. And the three head to a very isolated wooded area. And it's kind of tranquil. It's got like a deep flurry of woods. And you walk through that and there's a pond in the middle of those woods. So they start smoking this crack when they're actually inside the woods aspect of this forest, if you will. At some point during this, Rocky decides in his mind that he wants to not only rob Deborah, but kill Deborah Lacey. So Rocky grabs a nearby piece of heavy wood that had fallen from a tree, and he hits Deborah across the head with this big piece of wood. She falls down. She's not completely knocked out, but she's out of it. And then he pulls the drawstring out of his shorts, and he ties her hands together with the drawstring of these shorts. He then takes a rag and stuffs it in her mouth, and somehow he had gotten a piece of duct tape. It's not really clear where he got that from, maybe from the vehicle, but he duct tapes her mouth shut so she can't scream with that rag in her mouth. Then, with assistance from his girlfriend, he walks Deborah approximately 150 yards to that pond in the center of that wooded clearing, and he drags her to the edge. He grabs Deborah by the back of the neck, and he forces her head underwater, and he just holds her there. And you got to imagine this lady is just struggling, man. Her head's underwater. She can't breathe, but he's a big guy, Rocky, and he easily overpowers her, and he just holds her there as she's struggling until she just absolutely quits moving and she's dead. So at that point, he just leaves her where she's at, and Rocky and Karen steal all the cash out of Deborah's purse, a whole entire $30. $30. She got murdered over $30. They then steal her vehicle, which was a Lincoln Continental. They go to their drug dealer, or a drug dealer, and they trade it for 2 bags of basically $400 for each bag of crack. So $800 in crack and $30 cash to kill this woman. Absolutely crazy. They then smoke up all that crack, and they go about life as though nothing had ever happened. Now, fast forward 7 days later, and Deborah Lacey had a sister, and this sister realizes, wow, man, it's been a minute since I've heard from Deborah. She tries to reach her to no avail, and she gets really worried really fast. It just has never been that hard to reach Deborah. So she reaches out to the police, and she reports Deborah missing. So police, they decide to go patrol her neighborhood, and while doing so, they see a vehicle they deemed suspicious. It had a busted out back window. And then upon further investigation, they realize looks like the same vehicle that Deborah drove. Now, this vehicle's traveling down the road. It isn't parked. So they hit the lights and sirens, and they pull this vehicle over, and they haul out the 3 occupants, and they say, hey, this vehicle is involved in a disappearance, and we need to question you at headquarters. And they haul these guys in. And when they're talking to these guys at headquarters, they learn, because these guys tell them, hey, this ain't our vehicle. We don't know who owned this vehicle. We traded it for crack cocaine. And they also disclose that crack cocaine was traded to Rocky Beeman. So police, they start looking for Rocky to see if they can locate Deborah Lacey. They have no idea that she's already dead. They think maybe she's on a drug binge with Rocky. Now, around this time, detectives receive a call, and it's a sad call, and it's regarding a body found at a pond, which of course turned out to be Deborah Lacey, and they were able to confirm that by fingerprints. She had been in that pond by this time for 10 days. Now, shortly after, detectives did manage to determine where Rocky lived, which he lived with his girlfriend. That's why it took them a little while to locate him. But they figured that out. They go over there, they knock on the door, and Karen Wilkins, Rocky's girlfriend, answers that door. And they say, hey, is anyone else here, namely Rocky? And she says, yes. And she calls out to Rocky, and he comes to the door. Now, at this point in time, police don't have enough evidence to arrest or charge Rocky in Deborah's murder, but they were lucky to discover that he already had a warrant out for his arrest, so they could at least haul him in on that outstanding warrant. It was something minor, but they were able to do that. And that would enable police to question both Rocky and his girlfriend. And initially, they questioned them together. And they asked this couple, hey, how do you know Deborah? And initially, when they were together during this questioning, both of them denied. Deborah? Deborah who? We don't know a Deborah. Denied even knowing her. But police did what police do, and they know, hey, usually when we separate people, all of a sudden the truth comes out, and they separated Rocky and his girlfriend. And when the couple was separated, both of them started singing like canaries. I mean, individually to police, they would tell the entire story. And Rocky especially just lays it all out there. Everything I just told you about this crime, Rocky confessed to himself. Now, you're going to find out later there was a little bit of a deal put in place for him to put that on record, if you will. But at this point, the confessions come out and everyone gets arrested. Now, Rocky is charged with first-degree murder, and Karen Wilkins, his girlfriend, was charged with second-degree murder. Now, his confession, as I said, did come at a cost, and that was the death penalty. So in exchange for these confessions, the death penalty was pulled completely off the table. They basically told him, if you confess to it, we won't go for the death penalty. He agreed. And eventually in court, he pleaded to life in prison. Now, Karen Wilkins, to her part, was sentenced to 30 years in prison and then 10 years of probation. So for Rocky, it's off to various prisons. But in March of 2012, he ends up at Apalachee Correctional Institute, and this is in Jackson County, Florida. Now, this particular prison, it's a rough one. It's located in the panhandle of Florida. It was built in 1949, and it's home to roughly 1,300 inmates in Florida. Now, that particular prison also has everything from max security to medium security to even minimum custody. And it's while in this particular prison that Rocky Beeman, he sets his sights on a 44-year-old cellmate by the name of Bruce Hunsicker. Now, Bruce was in prison serving 6 life sentences. Bad dude, right? Well, even worse than a bad dude. These 6 life sentences were for raping a 10-year-old girl at knife point. Just some really sick shit. Now, when you go to prison for something like that, the last thing that you're going to want to do is tell anyone about it. Even the hardest convicts in prison don't like a freaking pedophile. And you will, for sure, at one point get killed over something like that. And that's big time props in prison when you kill a pedophile. So this guy, he's obviously going to keep this to himself. No telling what he was telling people he was actually in prison for. And his first few months, even his cellmate, Rocky, he didn't know what this guy was actually in prison for. Now, initially, them two, they seemed to get along. But that relationship would start to kind of falter a little bit because Bruce borrowed some coffee from Rocky and he didn't return that coffee, which, look, that is a big time slap in the face in prison. You borrow something, you better return it. Otherwise, it's looked at as stealing from another inmate and you will get killed over shit like that. So shortly after that, to add insult to injury for this guy, Rocky learns about Bruce's charges. And I'm not sure exactly how he learned of those charges. It could have, and it was likely that Rocky came across some of Bruce's legal paperwork. But one thing was for sure, he was pissed off about it. And it's a problem also when you're this dude's cellmate. Because if the other inmates discover, hey, Bruce over here is a pedophile, and you're the cellmate of Bruce, and it seems like you two get along, they're going to wrap you up into that as well and consider you a pedophile. No doubt about it. So Rocky decides right then and there, as soon as he learns about this, that, hey, I got to kill this guy. And Rocky wasn't a total idiot. He actually was a planner type of guy, and he really digs into planning on how to kill this pedophile, and he starts studying Bruce's patterns. And one thing that he notices in the patterns of Bruce is that every day at 4 o'clock, this dude takes a shower. So Rocky figures that out, and he fashions a 14-inch shank. And the way he made this shank, it was out of a piece of metal fence, and he just sharpened that sucker down by using concrete to where it's basically a 14-inch dagger. And 5 days after learning about Bruce Hunsicker's crime, he approaches him in the shower, and he has that 14-inch shank, and he attacks him from behind. And when I say attacks him, he stabbed him 80 times, killed him right there on the spot, blood everywhere. So after that, Rocky takes a shower to clean all of that blood off of him, and his shorts that he had on were so stained, he just flushes those shorts and, incidentally, the shank down the toilet. Then he goes back to his cell as if nothing ever happened. A few hours later, correctional officers would discover the body of Hunsicker in that shower after he missed a count. So there was no evidence of this murder, even though they found the shank in the shorts inside the, septic system of this prison. There's so much DNA in there. Think about it. This is getting flushed down a toilet. You can't tie that to anybody. But Rocky was his cellmate. And so that's pretty much the first person they're going to question anyway. When they go in there to question Rocky about his cellmate, Rocky confesses to everything. He confesses to the whole crime. He said, look, I have a hatred of child molesters. I found out this guy has 5 life sentences for raping this 10-year-old girl multiple times. And so, yeah, that drove me to do it. And I'm pretty proud of it. I put this guy out of his misery, took him off the face of the earth, and I don't feel even bad about it. So he confesses to all that, and he gets moved almost immediately to solitary confinement. And he sits in solitary for 5 years. So you get out of your cell 1 hour a day. You're in that cage the rest of the time, and you, of course, don't have cellies. Now, after about 5 years, he does get sent to another prison, and that is known as Santa Rosa Prison. This is in 2017. Now, at this point, he's 39 years old, and Santa Rosa is a lot newer than the prison he came from. It was actually built in 1996, and it's also a good bit larger than where he came from. This particular prison housed 3,000 inmates. Now, while he does get downgraded for some reason from solitary to like maximum security, the only difference that made for Rocky is that he would be allowed to have a cellmate at this point. And this is pretty crazy. The winning cellmate in this case was a 27-year-old by the name of Nicholas Anderson. And get this, Nicholas Anderson was serving 20 years in prison for, what do you think? You guessed it, child molestation. Now, why prison officials thought that would be a good idea is anyone's guess. Why they would take a guy that had already killed a cellmate for child molestation and put him in a cell with someone who's convicted of child molestation? I don't know. And same situation as before. This guy, he 100% ain't going to tell Rocky why he's in prison. However, that doesn't stop a rival gang from telling Rocky why he's in prison. So Rocky hears that he's a child molester from this rival gang, and he goes back to his cell. And he confronts Nicholas Anderson, and he demands Nicholas show him his papers. And that's the papers, y'all, that you get in prison that basically specify why you're incarcerated. And everybody keeps their papers when they're in prison when you're an inmate. Now, Anderson, who I am quite sure knew that Rocky had already killed a child molester who was also his cellmate in prison, he's like, fuck that. And he refused to show his papers to Rocky. Basically, he was like, hey, man, I told you I'm in prison for drugs, and if you don't believe me, then that's your problem. I don't want to have to prove this to you. But that pretty much tells Rocky everything he needs to know, and that is this guy's a child molester. So he did just what he did the first time. He starts plotting to kill Anderson. And it was very well thought out in this scenario as well. In this case, he would time the amount of time that it took the guards to walk down the tier. They would pass his cell about every 25 minutes. So in his mind, this gives me 25 minutes to kill this guy. He then gets his hands on a AA battery, and he just grinds this AA battery into the concrete. And he grinds it and manages to flatten it so much that this thing is like a razor blade when he's done with it. A few days later, just after a midnight stroll of the correctional officers past the cell, he knows, I got 25 minutes here. This is the time. And Rocky tells Anderson that Anderson's got to go. He basically kind of gives him one last shot. Hey, you got to go right now. And Anderson says, fuck you, I ain't going nowhere. He just flat out refuses. So Rocky punches him right in the face and damn near knocks Anderson out cold. So when he's on the ground and he's trying to get his wits about him, Rocky takes some bed sheets and he literally hog ties Anderson, and he starts to strangle him with these bed sheets. And imagine Anderson just flailing back and forth while Rocky's just squeezing harder with these bed sheets. And eventually, at some point, Anderson just quits moving altogether. So Rocky makes an assumption that Anderson's dead, and he kind of lets the pressure off of those bed sheets. Anderson sinks to the floor. But Rocky notices, oh shit, this guy's still breathing. So at this point, Rocky says, I'm tired of playing with this guy. He pulls out that battery shank and he slits Anderson's throat from ear to ear with this thing. Anderson just bleeds out right there in the cell. Well, an inmate in a neighboring cell notices all this blood going down the cell block. And this is a lot of blood, like a slaughtered pig. And he goes crazy and starts screaming for the COs, somebody dead in here, whatever he was yelling. And the COs run down that tier and they make that discovery of Nicholas Anderson. And there's no doubt who did it, right? Rocky, because they're locked in a cell together. Nobody else could do it. There's just no doubt about it. So they pull him out of there. They bring him to wherever they brought him to question him. And again, Rocky says, hell yeah, I did it. He's a child molester. He doesn't deserve to be breathing oxygen with me. And I'm not going to be in a cell with a child molester and have guys come after me. I hate child molesters, and that's why I killed him. Now, he does go to trial for both of these murders. The first trial, it took place in January of 2019. And in that trial, he does receive the death penalty, but it was after a lot of begging and pleading. You see, Rocky wanted the death penalty. He did everything he could to get the death penalty. He would even write the judge and talk about how much he enjoyed killing these child molesters, and that, hey, I'm going to tell you right now, if you don't give me the death penalty, the first chance I get, I'm going to kill another one. I'm going to keep killing them until you kill me. So eventually he gets his wish, and that judge gives him the death penalty. In the trial for the second murder that he committed in prison, that one took place in November. Same result. He gets another death penalty for that case. What has happened since then? Well, you know how it is with death penalty cases, and you can get the death penalty and sit in jail 30 years and still be alive. Rocky didn't want that. He wanted to be killed as soon as possible. And he would write letters to these judges, essentially begging them, hey, I want you to kill me as soon as possible. But that's not the way the system works, right? And Rocky, he was getting frustrated about that. So where is he now? Well, he's dead, but not by the way of the state of Florida, like you might think, but by his own hands. On June 10th of 2020, at the age of 42, while awaiting his execution and being very frustrated because in his mind it was taking too long, he hangs himself in his cell and thus didn't have to worry about getting the death penalty. But what a wild case. And look, you will find no one with any more resentment of child molesters than me. I don't think they deserve to be breathing oxygen either, in my opinion. But I'd be curious what you folks think. Is this vigilante justice, or is this guy a cold-blooded murderer? Now, I'll tell you, he was a murderer long before he killed these child molesters. That's what he was in prison for, as I told you. And so he was not a good guy by any measure. I don't really know what motivated him to become what's known as the Vigalante Killer of Florida. I don't know if maybe he felt like I committed this murder early in my life and I'm going to be scoring points with God here by taking out these people and being this vigilante and speaking up for kids of child molestation. Some people think he was molested when he was a child and this was his way of giving payback to child molesters. I don't know, but I found it to be a very intriguing case. And I'll tell you what, this guy's no little guy. You can check out the artwork. And if you're a member of the Patreon, I'm going to upload some pictures of Rocky Beeman and you can see for yourself. He looks like a mean sucker. He looks like someone that would kill your ass in prison quick. But there you have it. I thought that would be a good story to bring you this week. The Vigalante Killer, Rocky Beeman. Thank you so much for listening. And as I mentioned, check out the Patreon, patreon.com/Bloody Angola podcast, where you can get commercial-free early release episodes and more. Once again, patreon.com/Bloody Angola podcast. Thank you so much to those people for your support of what I do here on Bloody Angola. I'll bring you another case next week, and I'll definitely be going to another state, but this one was just too intriguing to pass up, and I thought you'd like to hear it. Until next time, for Bloody Angola, I'm your host, Jim Chapman. Much love.
I walk a straight line, shackled and chained. Oh, gruesome Gertie is calling my name. There is no mercy in this penitentiary. Just ask the Hill String Gang, Rango